Hey everyone, it is Haley Gabrielle here, and I am back with another miraculous story from the book called The Wings of God, Miraculous Stories of the Lord and His Angels at Work by Joe Wheeler. This one is on page 67, and it is called 3 Months in His Presence, an account by Virginia Lively. It says, when friends ask how I first discovered that my hands have been given a ministry of healing, I'm sure they don't expect to hear the kind of story which I am about to set down. Apparently, the fact that I am a suburban housewife who saves grocery stamps and has to watch her weight seems a poor beginning to a story of divine intervention. It started the year my father entered the tuberculosis sanitarium in Tampa. We had long since given up hope. He was too old for an operation, and we had seen the x-rays. The last thing on earth that would have occurred to any of us, mother or my sister or me, was to ask God to step in and change the medical facts. And yet my husband, Ed, and I were active church members. As a banker, Ed was head of fundraising. Our 2 children went to Sunday school, and I belonged to all the groups. We were, in short, typical civic-minded churchgoers, which is why the tears, when they began, caused Ed and me so much embarrassment. It was October as we drove home from a PTA meeting that I suddenly began to cry. I was in charge of a carnival that year, and at the meeting there had been some criticism of the plans. When I was still crying at bedtime, Ed put his arms around me and said, "Honey, no carnival is that important." But it wasn't the carnival. Even as I cried, I knew that these tears were for something far bigger. I cried myself to sleep, and in the morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, the tears started again. I choked them back, but as soon as Ed and the children left, the tears burst out again. This incredible state of affairs lasted 4 days. I took to wearing dark glasses, even in the house, so that the family would not guess how constantly I was crying. I was sure I was having a nervous breakdown. On the morning of the 4th day, after Ed and the children had left, a curious change took place. I saw nothing. I heard nothing. Yet, all at once, there was power in the air around me. That's crazy. The atmosphere itself seemed to hum and crackle, as though I stood in the center of a vast electric storm. As I tried to put it into words, it sounds fantastic, but at the time I had no sense that something beyond the impossible was taking place. I had sunk into the high-backed chair in the living room when suddenly through the window I saw the eastern horizon. Trees and houses stood between me and it, but I seemed to see right beyond to the place where earth and sky come together. And there, where they met, was a ball of light. This light was moving, traveling toward me with incredible speed. It appeared white, yet from it poured out all the colors I had ever seen. And then it was beside me. Although it seemed impossible that anything with such energy could hold still, it took a position at my right shoulder, and there it stayed. And as I stared, I started to smile. I smiled because he was smiling at me. For I now saw that it was not light, but a face. How can I put into words the most beautiful countenance I have ever seen? He is perfect, was the first thought that came. His forehead was high, his eyes exceptionally large, but I could never fix the color of his eyes, any more than I could the color of the sea. Much, much more than individual features was the overwhelming impression of life. Unhampered life, life so brimming over with power and freedom that all living things I had seen till that moment seemed lumps of clay. So I'm actually getting goosebumps as I'm reading this aloud. I just read it like 5 minutes ago to myself, and I thought it was great, but now that I'm reading it aloud, I'm actually like getting goosebumps. Okay, so I'll continue. Not for a moment did I hesitate to call this life at my side Jesus. And 2 things about him struck me the most. The first was his humor. I was astonished to see him often break into outright laughter. And the second was his utter lack of condemnation. That he knew me down to my very marrow, knew all the stupid, cruel, silly things I had ever done, I realized at once. But I also saw that none of these things, or anything I would ever do, could alter the absolute caring, the unconditional love that I saw in those eyes. I could not grasp it. It was too immense a fact. I felt that if I gazed at him for 1,000 years, I could not realize it all. I did not have 1,000 years. I had 3 months. For as long as that, the face of Jesus stayed before me, never fading, never withdrawing. Many times I tried to tell someone else what I saw, but the words would never come. And meanwhile, I carried on with my tasks, meals and shopping and the PTA carnival, but effortlessly, scarcely knowing I was doing them. So fixed were my thoughts on him. At the same time, I had never seemed so aware of other people. How this was possible when my mind was full of him alone, I don't know, but it was true. My husband, especially. Far from feeling that a third person had entered our marriage, I felt that Christ was the marriage, as though all along he had been the force drawing us together. In the Bible, all at once, I couldn't read enough of it. It was like tearing open a letter from someone who had known this presence as a flesh and blood person, full of just the kind of specific details I longed to hear. Certain passages in particular had a stranger effect on me. When the Bible described Jesus healing someone, the actual print on the page seemed to burn. The hand that touched it would tingle as if I had touched an electric current. Very interesting. And then one afternoon, before the children got home, I was sitting, just looking at him, when all of a sudden, in a patch of sunlight on the wall, appeared the X-ray of my father's chest. So pause real quick. This actually reminds me of the passage in Daniel when the Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin is written on the wall, like the hand on the wall, the writing. This is what that reminded me of. Okay, so he saw the father's X-ray, and it was all scar tissue and cavities. Then, as I watched, a white mist moved slowly up the wall. When it passed the diseased tissue, there appeared on my wall a picture of a healthy lung. "Then Dad's well," I said aloud. And at that, the person at my side burst into peal after peal of joyous laughter, which said that wholeness was always God's way. Amen. I thought my heart would burst as I waited for next Wednesday, Dad's x-rays. I enjoyed the scene in my mind again and again, imagining the ring of the telephone and Mother's voice stammering with excitement. "Darling, the most amazing, the most glorious." But when Mother called, her voice was flat. "The most annoying thing, Virginia. They got the slides mixed up. Poor Dad's got to go back for x-rays tomorrow. Why, they sent down pictures of someone who had never even had tuberculosis." But of course, the x-rays the next day showed no sign of disease either. Dad was healed and lived out his long life in thanksgiving to God. And it was Dad's healing that convinced me I must try to describe the indescribable thing that had happened to me. I went to an elderly pastor whom I had known a long time. To my astonishment, he understood me at once. He gave me some books which described fairly similar things. Then he said the words I have wished he unsaid so often. He said, "Don't be surprised, Virginia, if the vision fades over a time. They usually do, you know." Fade, I thought, as I drove home with that joyous presence beside me. Oh, it can't, it mustn't. For the first time in the whole incredible experience, my attention veered from him to myself. Uh-oh, spoiler alert, that's the issue. When we take our eyes off of Jesus and back onto ourselves, our eyes should always be fixed on Jesus. So let me go back into the book here. So page 71, she said, "And in that instant, the vision was diminished. Actually, it disappeared for a second or two, though right away the radiant face was beside me again, but the damage was done. The seed of self-concern was sown. The bright presence would sometimes be missing for an hour or more. The more worried I got, the more self-centered I grew. What have I done? What will I do without him?" When he did return, there would be no accusation in his eyes, though. Just a tremendous compassion, as though he realized how difficult it had become for me to see him at all. At last, all that was left of this experience was the strange tingling in my hands as I read Bible stories of healing. One day, I was visiting a friend in the hospital. She was hemorrhaging and in pain. On an impulse, I reached out and touched her. My hand began to burn just as it did during the Bible reading. My friend gave a little sigh of comfort and fell asleep. When the doctor examined her, he found that the hemorrhaging had stopped. Over the next 8 years, there were dozens, scores of experiences of this kind, all as inexplicable as the first. And yet for me, they were still years of emptiness and waiting. I will always be with you, he had told me when I last saw him. But how will I know if I can't see you? I called to him, for he had seemed so far away. You will see me, he said, and then he was gone. But the years went by, and the vision had not come back. And then one day, while speaking to a church group, I saw those love-lit eyes smiling once again into mine. Aw. I looked again. The eyes belonged to a lady in the second row. Suddenly the room was full of him. He was in the eyes of everyone in the room. You will see me, he said. I used to wonder what would have happened if the old pastor had never spoken of the vision fading. Might I have had it forever? I think not. I think that the days when Jesus was real to my eyes were the days of my childhood, of my faith, the joyous, effortless time of discovery. But I do not think he lets it stay that way for long. He didn't for his first disciples. He doesn't for us today. He gives us a glimpse only. Perhaps he let me look so long because I am slow to learn. But finally, he takes away all sensory clues. He is bigger than our eyes and ears can make him. So he gives us instead the eyes of faith in all mankind in which to discover his face. So that one was really interesting in my opinion. So she started basically with like a very humble, kind of contrite heart. And the Lord says in Psalms that he is near to those that have a broken and contrite spirit. So she definitely met that criteria for when this first started happening to her. So she was very humble and just thinking of others a lot is what she said. So we want to be thinking of God first and in a humble spirit, and then it's much easier for us to hear from the Lord. So it's just really fascinating that she was also like kind of, I describe it as in emotional distress. And so she was leaning more on God in general during that time. And then once she experienced him and felt his presence, she exuded that everywhere she went, and her faith was really boosted. And then that's when she saw the healing of her dad and then the healing of her friend. I find it interesting also that she would touch the page and feel like a burning in her hands, and then she touched her friend, and the friend got healed. So the Bible, as we know on this channel, says believers will lay hands on the sick and recover. So she was definitely experiencing that, which is awesome, which any of us can experience. And then she kind of ends it with just continue to have faith in God and continue to seek his face, and you will see him in faith, and you will see the results of your faith in him with his love and mercy touching others as you submit to him. So I hope this was an encouragement to everyone today to just keep on going in your journey with the Lord, and do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you shall reap. And so I just pray blessing over everyone today, and just be encouraged that Jesus sees you and he celebrates you and he is there with you throughout anything that you're going through, and just continue to lean on him and seek his face, and you will find it. Blessings on you. Continue to keep your faith muscles strong. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.